We got a penalty for not being single file coming on the pit road. Yeah, it was a lot of fun when we used to be able to race, but now it's just, you go back to law school, gotta be a litigator. So many rules.
Well, thank you, Alan Gustafson, Esquire. I am Mike Forde from NASCAR Communications, and this is Hauler Talk. I am joined, as always, with my friend and co-host Amanda Ellis. Amanda, how are you?
I am doing great.
And also joined, as always, NASCAR.com writer, NBCSports.com writer, Nate Ryan. How you doing, Nate?
Doing well, Ford, and very excited to learn that Fordham included an accelerated law school program for you. So congratulations on your Esquire title.
That's the only reason I have this podcast, apparently. Nate sounds like he's in the witness protection program right now. You got the little muffled voice. You playing a little Michael Jordan flu game today there, Nate?
I've got a cold. You can probably hear it.
You sound good. So we will start with Alan and the penalty to the number 9 car of Chase Elliott at Homestead. And, again, we joke that when there isn't not much going on in a race weekend, it's good news. We don't want to be the story. NASCAR officials do not want to be the story each week, but there's not much to talk about in the podcast. But really, there is going to be a lot to talk about in this podcast. A lot going on. We have a great guest later on in the show. Alan Taylor, the head of NASCAR security, also was the Secret Service on the President Obama detail. So a lot of interesting stuff there. So looking forward to talking to him as well. But let's start with the big officiating discussion from Homestead, and really maybe the only one, and that was the penalty to Chase Elliott. So what he was called for was entering pit road, not single file. So the rule states you have to enter pit road, stay single file until you get to your pit box, and then you can turn off there. So if you saw the in-car camera, anyone watching the Max in-car cameras had a great view of this. I know several were posted on X as well. When he hit pit road, he veered left. I think it seemed to me this is all kind of really, this is an educated guess, but I could be wrong here. It did seem to me that he turned left, accelerated, realized that he made a mistake, throttled back, and then got back into line. That might not have been what exactly happened and what was going on in Chase's brain, but that felt like, watching the video, a plausible scenario there. Regardless of what exactly his intent was, he did break that rule. So he went double file and was called for the penalty. So that was the penalty there. And here's the couple things to unpack here. And the first one is, why do we have this penalty? And the reason is really safety. So when a car enters pit road, if they turn left and get side by side with the car, and that car on the inside line that is staying in line and assuming that everyone else is following the rule, and usually they do. This is a very rare penalty. You don't see this penalty all that often. They turn left into their pit box. That is a recipe for a spin out on pit road. Ton of crew members on pit road. We, as Elton Sawyer, if you listen to Sirius XM, The Morning Drive this morning, said, we really don't need any help creating chaos on pit road. If you saw what happened with the 22 and the 21, thank goodness there weren't any crew members there, because that could have been a very dangerous situation. They happen to spin in 2 separate pit boxes. So that's why we have that rule, is so that the 9... so that if the 2 comes down on the 9, doesn't get spun out, or any car doesn't get spun out if they have one of those first few pit box on pit road. So, Nate or Amanda, when you saw that penalty, what were your first thoughts? Did it seem pretty clear to me, to you guys?
Well, my first thought is, we see this under green, right? Like, I think it's important to draw the distinction here. You can enter too wide into the pits under a green flag, right?
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
Green flag. Sorry to cut you off, Nate. But the reason, the sort of delineation there is we have some more leniency under green, and the reason being is they're going at pretty full speed, coming out of 3, coming out of 4. They need to slow down. The arc is a little bit different, so it's going to be much harder to get into single file on green flag pit stops. Under yellow, the caution comes out, the pace car collects the leader, and usually we have at least one lap of caution, sometimes multiple laps of caution to get lined up, and then we open pit road and allow the teams to pit. So there's much more time to have an orderly entering fashion onto pit road. So that's kind of why we differentiate those two rules and those two under those two flag statuses.
That makes sense, as does your explanation about if Cindric was in the first pit, what would be considered the last pit stall, but really the first pit stall on entry. If Cindric's in that pit stall and he tries to pit, he's getting spun and doesn't know it because he's checking his dashes, his gauges. Steve Woodhart made a really good point or I think it was Todd Gordon actually, made a really good point of explaining on Inside the Race that there's a lot going on for drivers as they're coming in the pits. So that's one of the reasons you guys are on top of that and ensuring it's not as simple as Austin Cindric checking his blind spot when he pulls into his pit stall and see, oh, Chase Elliott's there. I better take evasive action. So I get all that. I have one thing, and I have one more thing after that, but I'll let Amanda go next. There seemed to be confusion on Chase Elliott's part about he thought giving the spot back would overcome the penalty. Is the reason that giving the spot back doesn't overcome the penalty is because NASCAR doesn't want drivers stacking up so much that they have to bail left? It's just, they don't even want to put drivers in that situation. It's just about stay single file and don't even get in a situation where you could be double file. We don't care what your explanation is. If somebody went slow in front of you, go slower. Is that sort of the take?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. So kind of two answers to that question. So one, the reason giving your spot back doesn't really matter to us, when you pull out a line like that, the damage could already be done. If he did have that 40th pit stall or 41st or 42nd or 40, whatever it is, I'm not sure what Homestead's pit road layout is, but say there's 40 pit boxes. If he had that 40th, 39th, 38th pit box, the damage would have already been done. So we can't allow any teams, regardless of where they pit, to pull out a line and create that situation. So giving it back, then all of a sudden you have sort of gray areas where the team got the offending driver got a little lucky that they just happened to be behind a car that was pitting further up pit road. So that's why that doesn't really come into our calculus when we're making that call.
Yeah, and I really liked this tweet that Jeff Gluck sent out soon after that penalty happened. He said, just went back to Chase Elliott's in-car camera when he was coming to pit road. Sorry to report to Chase fans that while he may have taken a left to avoid hitting Cindric, it didn't look like he fully gave the spot back. Maybe a half a car length, the NASCAR penalty appears correct. So the reason I loved that tweet is most of the time the fans 1,000% want us to be wrong in that situation. They don't want NASCAR to be right, especially when it's dealing with Chase Elliott. But the thing that I thought was kind of neat about that was that Gluck had the opportunity using the new Max camera feature with the in-car cameras to go and actually look at it from Chase's vantage point, which is something that I thought, helps the fans understand a little bit of how, this situation can occur on pit road.
So Amanda just did something brilliant there. She used Jeff Gluck to blame Chase Elliott for screwing up instead of just saying Chase Elliott did not give the spot back fully. That was... No.
You misinterpreted what I was saying. I was using Jeff's tweet on X to point out how neat I think it is that, fans and media members can see in-car cameras now to have a different vantage point from, actually what the drivers see. But I totally get where you're going. I definitely could have just blamed Chase. He didn't do a great job. But y'all know,
text from Jeff Gluck here. I got a text from Jeff Gluck. Why did Chase Elliott just cancel my driver ambassador program interview this week? Just kidding. I do have one more question, though. If Chase Elliott is in, again, the last pit stall, which is technically the first pit stall on entry, I know it's confusing, but is he allowed any dispensation to go to the left and pull out of line a little bit? Because there are some pit road entries where you have to make that turn right after the commitment line. So are there some, I don't know if it would apply to Homestead, or I don't know if it would be Martinsville or Bristol, but you know what I'm saying? Like, are there some places where pulling to the left and essentially creating a second lane to get into that first pit stall and entry, is that allowed?
I don't think you're allowed unless you're entering your pit stall. So you can't set yourself up for a better entry. You just have to go in there. I think that was part of it. And I think, Chase not giving up his spot fully back, he still was by half a car length. It's almost like you're splitting it long ways, or actually, the left rear, the left side and the right side. He didn't get all the way back in line. And that's why he didn't really give it all the way back. I think there was a little bit of a, what it amounted to a tenth of a second advantage there that he gave himself, if that. But as we all know, on pit road, it's every tenth of a second really matters. So, but to answer your question, I believe it is, as long as you're pulling out of line to enter your pit stall, that's fine. That is allowed.
And does this get called, like, I feel like I remember this happening to Martin Truex Jr. at New Hampshire once when he kind of accelerated into his pit and created that second lane. Is this like a once a season, a few times a season? Do you have a sense of how often it happens?
Not often. Yeah, no, it's a great question. I don't have the data on that one, but it's very rare. And that's why I think it became such a hot topic on social media, because it's such a rare penalty that you don't really see it. It's funny, we get accused of favoritism for Hendrick, and then I looked at some tweets, and then now we're getting favoritism. If it was a Penske car, we would have let it go. And then, we also love Toyota really a whole lot. So I think it's surprising we don't have more 3-wide finishes with all the favoritism we got divvying up. But one other piece that I wanted to touch on, which I thought was interesting, and Alan, and I think, the spotter talks about it a little bit here, and I think we have a clip of those three conversations between Chase, Alan, and the spotter of the 9.
We got a penalty for not being single file coming on the pit road. I just have them look at it because I gave the spot back. They all checked up. I moved left to not run in the back of someone, and then I gave him the spot back before I even turned down. Just have them look at it. That's a very reasonable thing. Alan, that's going to be on you talking to them down here. They don't want to hear it up here. I'm trying. There was zero advantage there. Was simply just trying to not hit the guy. I mean, I don't know what they want. I don't know what to do any different. Just stay in line here, but pull over if they don't return this penalty here before the cone. So newsflash, they're not interested in anything but their decision. So that's where we're at. Yeah, it was a lot of fun when we used to be able to race, but now it's just, go back to law school. Got to be a litigator. So many rules.
So, lot more to unpack on that one. I think, to Alan's last point, so many rules. That's something we have had side conversations over beers, Nate. That the NASCAR rule book is robust, no doubt about it. But every rule does have there's a reason for every rule, and Hendrick Motorsports might be half of the rule book for those reasons, but a lot of it is safety. So as we mentioned, the safety, we kind of touched on pulling it out and pulling out a line there. And I think Chase said that he did what he did so he wouldn't stack up. So my hypothesis was incorrect. It sounded like Chase was being sincere there, that he had a reason for pulling out a line. But the intent, as we always say, you can't really judge intent there, and NASCAR doesn't judge intent. But one thing I want to touch on is the conversation, and spotter. We have a spotter on spotter stand. We have an official on the spotter stand, John Sacco, longtime official for NASCAR, has a very good relationship with all the spotters. So if there is a problem on the spotter stand, or if the spotter has a question, they can go to John and he'll help them out, or he'll communicate with the race control, Brad Moran, specifically the NASCAR Cup Series managing director, and have that discussion. The other option.
It is worth noting that Brad is on radio with the officials.
Yes.
The entire race.
Yep.
So that is a channel
Good
that
point.
he manages during the race. Yeah.
Right. And to that point, the other option is and why he said, you got to handle it, Alan, because apparently John wasn't really listening, in his opinion, to his reasoning, the spotter's reasoning. And then the other option is a instant message feature through Microsoft Teams that every team has, every crew chief has, up to race control. Chad Little, one of our officials, manages that system. Or Alan could also talk to the official assigned to the 9 pit box. So I'm not sure what conversation or how that conversation went with Alan and either the official or Chad, but one of the questions I got on social media after that happened was, hey, last week you specifically said that you guys would listen to teams. And what happened here? So I think what happened here is, one, we're only hearing one side of the story. So I'm not, it might be that we did listen and we disagreed and we got to keep moving. Like I said, there are no timeouts in NASCAR. So we have to make quick decisions. Two, I think we realized what the arguments were going to be before we called the penalty. And I think with this penalty, again, I'm saying I think a lot. I have information from what I've heard throughout competition meetings today, but also to be perfectly candid, I was not in race control, so wasn't part of those conversations as they were happening. But being in race control, and Amanda can attest to this, often I have an idea of how this probably went down. When we see a penalty like not entering pit road under single file, to your point, Nate, it is so rare that we say, all right, let's look at this again. Did he get shoved? If he gets shoved out of line, there's some different calculus there for us. Was it a stack up situation where he was avoiding wrecking? We'll give some benefit of the doubt. In our eyes, that wasn't the case. Giving the spot back, we already knew that does not matter in this rule. It doesn't apply to our decision making. The only other possible explanation was, did Chase feel that he was single file and that the 2 actually was the one to get out of line? We did not feel that to be the case either. If you look at the in-car camera, you can sort of say like that could be an argument that Chase could make, but the 2 was pretty much in line with the person in front of him, the car in front of him. I don't know what car that was. And we viewed single file on the outside lane, which is where the majority of the cars were. All the cars were. They were a little bit zigzagged, but Chase clearly pulled out of that kind of formulated line that we viewed when we made this call. So we already probably had a feeling of what all the counter points that the 9 team was going to make. And when they made those points, we already decided that doesn't hold water. Point 2 doesn't hold water. Point 3 doesn't hold water. So we made the call, and we needed to get back to the lineup and back to green. So that's
and I didn't interpret Alan's comments, though I did appreciate the sarcasm when he said "newsflash." I thought that was very well played, but
and short memory.
And yeah,
because we talked about last week in 2020. Newsflash, we won the championship because we changed our mind on a call.
Yeah, so what I would say is kind of how I interpreted what he was saying there is not that like we weren't listening to their reasoning. NASCAR listening to their reasoning wasn't changing our decision on the call. So like my gut says the official in the box was listening to what Alan was saying and taking that information and delivering it up to the tower. He probably was saying something like, he or she, depending on who was in the pit stall, was saying something like, the crew chief is saying X, Y, or Z. But to your point, we were confident in the call. So that, their arguments weren't going to change how that penalty proceeded. But the official was most likely doing their job in delivering that information up. Because a lot of times what actually happens is all 3 happen. So Stocko's radioing that the spotter is saying X, Y, or Z. the official in the box is radioing up that the crew chief is saying X, Y, or Z. And then usually an engineer or a car chief or someone who's on the box is also messaging Chad their thoughts on that penalty as well. So in most occasions, all three are happening at once because the teams are trying to get NASCAR to change their mind.
Right.
All right. We're going to have a fan question this week from David. David, thank you for your question. This week, NASCAR probably had to work with local authorities as the wildfires approached the track in the week leading up to the race. It would be cool to hear about the extent to which NASCAR and the track have to be in communication with local leaders and authorities each week. Great question. Obviously, a unique week in Homestead as it related to the ongoing fires. And yes, we were in constant communication with local leaders and authorities. And Forde, I think you have some information, kind of to exactly how we navigated last week from that perspective.
Yeah, and if you saw earlier in the race, we honored the first responders, and really incredible efforts by them. And so, yes, we did work with the track, and we did work with first responders, fire, ambulance, medical, police, and we do that every race weekend. So, we have great relationships with local law enforcement. We have great relationships with the FBI, Homeland Security. They work hand in hand with NASCAR every single week, and we can, by happenstance, have, as I mentioned earlier, Alan Taylor coming up here as our guest, and we can ask him a little bit more about that as well. But as far as the fire situation, really, it got pretty close. By the 20th, which was Thursday, it was about 100 yards from the racetrack's fence line. And by Cup race day, 27,000 acres had burned. So really serious issue. And it took a lot of effort to really make the race weekend happen. We were in scenario planning for potentially having to postpone Friday night's Truck Series race. It never really got to the serious phase, but because of the air quality from smoke, that was something that we needed to seriously discuss. And thankfully, we were able to get, or not we, but the firefighters were able to tamp down the fire well enough where by Friday morning, it was gorgeous. There were social media videos I'm sure you saw, and hat tip to our teammate, Steph Harris, for taking some of those and really showing how beautiful the South Florida sunshine really was. So really impressive that it almost was an afterthought by Friday morning, the way the actual scenery looked. But so some stats. During that time, up to 4 helicopters at a time used the track's retention lakes as a water source to fight the fire. So there's ponds, like you probably know, have seen Lake Lloyd, for instance, in Daytona. There are several ponds and bodies of water in each racetrack, whether inside or outside. There's one in Homestead, and the helicopters used that water on Homestead Miami Speedway property to refill and then dump on the firefighters. Not dump on the firefighters. That would have been a problem. Dump on the fires themselves. And the tanker planes based in Lakeland, Florida, flew down to Homestead and spread nearly 10,000 gallons of fire retardant during each run. Besides providing the access to the lakes next to Homestead and Miami Speedway, part of the property was used as a staging area, and Miami-Dade Fire and Rescue helicopters utilized the helipad on property for refueling, technical breaks, and shift changes. So it was really interesting way that NASCAR and the local law enforcement and first responders worked hand in hand to really fight this problem. And shout out, we coordinated directly with Miami-Dade Fire and Rescue Chief Ray Jodla. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that name, and Homestead Police Chief Mario Knapp. So hat tip to those folks. It was it could have been a scary problem, but worked their butts off hand in hand with NASCAR and the local fire and rescue, and really led to a really great race weekend with 3 great races. So I thought that was interesting. Appreciate that question on X. Please keep them coming. Reach out to me at mford on X, Amanda M. Ellis for Amanda's X feed, and then Nate has a Facebook page, Nate Ryan, his journalist page, where he posts all his work. Ask questions on any of those. We love answering fan questions. That's the whole reason for Hauler Talk, to really explain the nuances of NASCAR and talk about some of the things that don't get as much coverage because I said this yesterday to somebody. NASCAR fans, without a doubt, are the smartest fan in sports. There are so many. I learn from fans more often than not, where they catch these little nuances and these little rules that it's really impressive. And I'm a fan of baseball, football, basketball, all of them. And I don't think anyone's as astute as NASCAR fans. So appreciate that question. And hopefully that answered it with all the great work that the fire department, police department, and NASCAR did hand in hand.
So out of the blue on Sunday night, I get this email that pops in, and it's from NASCAR Insights. Of course, I'm aware of what Racing Insights is. They do a great job. They put out stats for all of NASCAR's national series, give us all the information, statistical nuggets that all of the broadcast partners use and that NASCAR uses in its information that's disseminated to the media every week. But this was NASCAR Insights, which I'm going to lean on you for here to explain it, because I'm not sure I'm totally up on everything here, because like I said, I was unaware of this. It kind of came out of the blue. It's a new kind of like next gen stats, like advanced metrics, that is going to be put out after every race, started at Homestead. It's going to have passer rating, defense rating, speed rating, and restart rating. I think all of those are fairly self-evident, but passer rating measures a driver's efficiency in overtaking. Defense rating evaluates a driver's ability to hold their position. Speed rating analyzes a driver's overall pace. Restart rating assesses a driver's performance in gaining or maintaining positions after starts and restarts. So, Forde, obviously, you are very well versed in the history of loop data, which goes back to almost, I think, 20 years now. And that essentially created like this new generation of NASCAR stats that told people like, how many positions are gained, how fast is a driver during the course of a run, green flag passes on track, all this stuff. But this, no offense, because I know loop data is near and dear to your heart, but this felt like it was like the next evolution of loop data, because it very much seemed even more kind of accessible. Every driver is rated in each of these categories. I'm just pulling up the Homestead stats right now, and I can just tell you, like, that Kyle Larson wins the race. He's number 2 in passing. He's number 2 in defense. He's number 2 in speed. He's 24th on restarts, which of course jives with what we saw during the race. He got passed on restarts twice by Bubba Wallace. So I like I said, this kind of came out of nowhere. So give me the down low, Forde. Like, is this something that NASCAR's been working on with Racing Insights? And is it like GPS based? Is it different than loop data? Give us all the information.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than loop data. So as you said, loop data is near and dear to my heart. But this, like you said, it's sort of the next evolution. So it comes from our friends at Racing Insights. So Racing Insights, as you said, provides all the stats to the television booth and beyond. The two head honchos at Racing Insights, if you will, Russell Wenrick and Jimmy Hicks, two great dudes. They are obsessed with stats. They are so good at their job. Like, I don't know if there's anyone at NASCAR who is as good at their job as those two guys are good at their particular job. They are on it. They have every stat, every driver, crew chief, owner stats throughout NASCAR history, and are able to access whatever curveball question you want to give them at a moment's notice. They'll give you the answer. It's pretty impressive. They have this website that is sortable, searchable. Anyway, so that's their background. And as a sort of side project over the last year, and I think we'll have Russell and or Jimmy in here to talk about this more in depth in a future episode. But sort of side project over the last year, they decided, hey, loop data exists. We have the top 5s, top 10s, average finish, laps led statistics that have been going on since 1949. But it'd really be helpful if there's a way to say, all right, how good was a driver's race? And loop data, I've always said, if you look at the driver rating, I think that is a really good indication. But this really drills down even deeper and has some stats that the loop data doesn't have. And they do use the loops for this. So it's not GPS based just yet. My guess is that it'll evolve into that as GPS data with SMT becomes more integrated into the sport and more accessible to fans versus really just the teams at this point. So you have things like you said with restart. We had fastest on the restart as part of a loop data stat, but this really looks at passes. I think it takes into a number of different accounts of how many positions you gained or lost on restarts. You have a score. They assign a score for how a car races in clean air to dirty air. There's a lot of different things you hear during a race broadcast of, man, that car is really good in a short run. This car is really good in a long run. And you look at the long run for Kyle Larson, was ranked first, short run ranked sixth. And that really tells me that he managed his tires in a way that helped him win that race. So that really helps tell the story. So these stats are going to be available on NASCAR.com. I believe they already are. If they're not, they will be soon. I think they did a little bit of soft launch. We had planned to start these stats to start the 2025 season, but wanted to get through the 2 super speedway races at least, and maybe even the road course at COTA, because, dirty air stats and speed stats, they don't really translate super well for super speedway races. So we wanted to get a couple races under our belt at, excuse me, at, kind of the traditional tracks of Phoenix and then Las Vegas. And now it felt like the right time to say, hey, Homestead, this is where we're going to do this. This is where we're going to introduce the fans to these stats. You mentioned Inside the Race with Steve Letarte. He started talking about these on Sunday night as well, and really use them to help explain why Kyle Larson won that race. So I think it's going to be a really, really helpful metric for fans to understand how a race was won or lost, and just another nugget for fans to digest and use when they're thinking about a race and thinking about their favorite sport. Like I just got done saying, NASCAR fans are the smartest fans in all the sports. I think this just is another tool to make them even more smart. That's hilarious that I use more smart when it's smarter. So the irony there is incredible. So anyway, yes, check out NASCAR.com. Kudos to Racing Insights. Great job on this. And I think this is going to be a cool tool. Okay, now we are joined by NASCAR Managing Director of Security, and that is Alan Taylor. Alan, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me, Amanda and Mike. Looking forward to it. I've heard a lot about your show.
You know what? There is very few people that I've gotten interview requests more than Alan Taylor. And I'm not even kidding, because, you see Alan, you see his team, Alan, Stan, Lizette. I'm probably missing a few people. I apologize if I am. But you'll see them often whenever there's a driver fight, which is always played over and over and over again. And they make cameos in there, usually trying to break it up. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But Alan's story is really, really interesting. He came to NASCAR from a pretty cool job. And Alan, let's just start there. What did you do right before NASCAR?
Right before I joined NASCAR, I was the special agent in charge of the Obama Protective Division, which consisted of President Obama and Mrs. Obama's protective details. So I was responsible for making sure that both of them were safe as in their former life.
Incredible. So how long were you doing that?
I did that for about 4 over 4 years. Prior to that, I was on the president's detail for both terms that President Obama was president.
That's wild. I can't. I know you can't really get into any wild stories about that, but I'm sure that job has taken you all over the world. Where have you kept count on how many countries you've been to, and if so, what are your top 3 favorite, and what are your top 2 craziest, like, I can't believe I've never heard someone has gone to that country before, and Alan Taylor has.
Well, I have to be a diplomat now, Mike. I can't pick favorite countries and everybody say, "Oh, it's picking favorites."
Don't worry.
However,
Amanda's already locked up the least likable person on this podcast. You can do no wrong here.
I would say that you could never go wrong going to Japan. That's always a favorite. You never could go wrong with going to New Zealand, and you never could go wrong with going to Australia. Those happen to be
right,
three of the furthest places away, but three of some of the coolest places.
What's one country that you've been to where, if you told 11-year-old Alan Taylor, hey, one day you're going to go to this country, 11-year-old Alan Taylor, 1, never heard of that country, and 2, would be really surprised at that?
I would say that probably a small little country off the coast of Africa, and it basically is I don't think anybody's probably heard of it. Djibouti, Africa. I think it'd probably be one of the places I never thought I would end up.
What brought you there?
Just when you visit around the world doing different things, you find yourself in the strangest places on diplomatic missions, and you just go wherever they take you.
That's pretty wild.
Remember, Forde, he has signed his life away on what he has.
He's
able to share here on the Over Talk podcast. Alan, one of my favorite.
I signed lots of paperwork before I left.
One of my favorite stories around the time, just obviously just before you joined us, but when you were in the interview process, is Steve Phelps got a very quick heads up one day that he needed to be near his phone because someone was going to be calling to give you a solid reference on your behalf, and that was Mr. Obama was calling to be able to share how they had worked with you, and obviously they were supporters of you. But have you and Steve ever talked about that? I know that when that happened, it was something that we all, kind of joked about, was that was probably one of the most important phone calls Steve has received, and he's received a lot of phone calls.
Well, it's one of those things that when you have to have references, it doesn't hurt to try to look and see who you can have as a reference, and go to the top just to make sure that somebody who has a good reputation himself would be a good reference for me. So that's what I decided I needed to do. And President Obama was gracious enough to offer to be a reference. So it was I couldn't turn it down since he made the offer.
I think that probably locked you in.
I think very well played. Very well played.
My references would be Amanda Ellis and Nate Ryan, which definitely would hold some water, but maybe not Barack Obama water. So you leave. President Obama's term is done, and I guess this job is open. How'd you come across NASCAR? Were you a fan, or you heard about the job opening and you applied? How did that process go?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Mike. I actually was not a fan. I remember as a kid, my dad used to have NASCAR on the TV. That's when you had to turn the TV knobs, that one at a time. And so we used to have it on the TV on Sundays all the time. And then basically when it came time for me to retire, I saw this job open, and I was looking through various sites that had job announcements. And I decided to say, hey, that looks like that might be a pretty cool job, and decided to apply for it and go for it. And nothing ventured, nothing gained, right?
Yeah, and now you're leading the team, which is great. And Alan has the type of perfect personality for this job. He's always in a good mood, always happy, always laughing. And there's some stressful situations. And, we were talking about it earlier in the show about how we worked with local law enforcement and fire department and police department in Homestead with the wildfires down there. But that happens every single week. So let's talk Martinsville, say, hypothetically, take any Darlington, Martinsville. What does NASCAR do going into a race weekend to ensure that the race weekend is completely safe as possible for the competitors, the industry, and most importantly, the fans? How close do we work with local law enforcement and even federal law enforcement? I assume. Well, not I assume. I know we've had that discussion before. What is NASCAR's relationship with law enforcement going into a race weekend?
Yeah, we could not do go racing on weekends without the help of our local, state, and federal law enforcement partners. And what we do every week prior to the planning starts early in the week and really before the season starts, as we liaison with all our law enforcement partners. Beginning of the week, let's say, for example, Martinsville, ironically, today we had our pre-event security call. And so on that call, we have track security, we have our local police department, and any other security elements that we are going to be using that weekend. And we go down a list of items that we cover, which is about probably 20 items that we go over just to make sure that everything's covered for that race weekend. And we do that at every race, before every race, because our goal is to try to provide consistency for our industry, for our fans, everybody that comes in contact with a NASCAR event, is to be able to know that they're getting the same element and type of security every race weekend, no matter where they may be. And in that planning process, everybody's on the same page. Any special events, special visitors that we may be having, and things like that, what have you, gives us an opportunity to start that process of having those conversations with everybody that's going to be involved, just to make sure that everything runs smoothly. So, that gives us a good opportunity to make sure everybody's working on the same page.
Yeah, and Alan, one thing that you guys often have to navigate is, when two drivers are frustrated with each other and they're showing that frustration, or even from the team side, a lot of times, it may not be the drivers, it may be the teams who are displeased with one another after a race event. But then we also have a unique element in NASCAR that I think sometimes can get overlooked, and that is that there are instances where fans have access to pit road or maybe potentially the garage area at certain times. And in a lot of sports, that's not the case, right? If there's a scuffle on the field or the court, most of the time it's just the players, that are involved. But in NASCAR, there's a lot of different variables that go into, we'll say like a post-race scenario. Just talk a little bit about how your team navigates those instances, but really, to your point of talking earlier about how, it requires so much support from others as well, is just, how you guys navigate that element of keeping fans safe, keeping teams safe, keeping drivers safe, but also understanding that at times the teams and drivers are going to want to display those frustrations as well.
Yeah, so, one of the things we always try to do is realize that, they are professional athletes. And I would agree with you for sure. No other professional sports league allows their fans to be as close as NASCAR does to its drivers and its professional athletes. And knowing that, we have to, plan accordingly as it relates to that, and making sure that, the credentialing system is the way it is. And people wonder why we are, so particular about fan access to certain areas or certain credentials. That's all part of the security plan, and making sure that only people who are authorized and allowed to be in those areas and those fans have that access. As it relates to as drivers and their frustrations. Obviously, they're out there doing battle on the track, lap after lap, and at the end, when that one driver feels like they've been wronged, when the cars stop, they want to vent that frustration out on the person they feel like that wronged them. And what I try to get my team to do is to, when we get there, and hopefully most of the time we get there, before action starts. Unfortunately, sometimes we're not because we can't be everywhere. Is that, when you get to the drivers, that you try to de-escalate. At that point, the driver's fixated on, I'm only going to do one thing, get to this other driver, and I may have a few words, or I might just go straight to punching. And so when you get there, you try to tell the driver, hey, calm down, relax, think about what you're going to do, think about what you're going to say, and hopefully you derail their one mind thought process of, I'm going to go do harm to this other driver. As some of you may remember, last year, the long walk, I believe it was at Martinsville. It was one of the longest walks I've ever made at that,
it's fantastic.
At that rate of speed.
The camera
trying
track
to
every step that you took.
Saying, hey, relax, calm down, think about what you're going to do, think about what you're going to say. And I like to think and hope that, he wasn't acknowledging me, but however, I kept saying the same things over and over in the process of breaking through, and that he was hearing me, and hopefully it helped to what led to, them having a conversation about, who did what to who, and it didn't lead to an all-out battle. And the other thing, too, is, for the drivers to have a conversation is one thing. For the teams to try to get involved is a whole other process that we really don't want to see happen, is that, hey, we want to see the drivers talk to each other and work things out. But we don't need the teams adding in to heat things up and make it worse situation than what it really is.
Yeah, and kudos to you on that. That was Taylor Gray and Christian Eckes at Martinsville. And I'm sure, without that long walk and you calming them down, there probably would have been fisticuffs. And, while that is fun to watch in the moment, it obviously can be a dangerous situation and lead to injuries. So you don't want that to happen. So,
right.
Well done there. I want to go back to Daytona 2025. And obviously we had a special visitor in President Donald Trump that I'm sure had a lot of lead up planning. Using your background in that, in your Secret Service background and knowing exactly what goes into protecting the life of the President of the United States, hugely important job. Were you able to use that background and your connections to make that process a lot smoother than it probably could have been? And I'm sure you still have contacts with the Secret Service that are with President Trump now. What was that experience like leading into Daytona and preparing for, VVIP guest?
Yes, that was very helpful, obviously, for being able to know both sides. I know what the Secret Service is looking for when they're coming in, and I know what NASCAR is looking for from our side. So being able to play that middle person and coming to a compromise in the middle and being able to help make those things happen is very helpful in situations like this, because as people who don't know what to expect, and when the Secret Service comes in, they come in with a lot of people and a lot of requests and just overwhelming the facility that they're coming to. And so being able to manage expectations from both sides has proven to be very helpful. The several times that we've had visits, of the president or vice presidents or candidates or what have you to the facility. And as you know, the amount of manpower that goes into that and the number of hours planning that is enormous. And the planning process, started weeks prior to when you first get the speculation that it may happen. And then you have, the internal planning that's taking place of trying to, put a plan in place, and hopefully it matches up with what, the White House is looking for when they get there on the ground, and you try to put everybody's plan together to make it to the point where, it works out and everybody's getting and accomplishing what they want to accomplish.
Alan, obviously you went from, like we've discussed, you went from several years in the political, government landscape to sports. And I know you said you weren't necessarily a NASCAR fan before you joined, NASCAR as a employee, but I'm just curious. I mean, that feels like a little bit of a shift, right? Going from, working in with the former president and working, in that area to sports. Is there something about NASCAR that has surprised you that maybe you didn't necessarily anticipate? Obviously, to your point, it was a job opportunity you were interested in, but is there something about the sport now that you've been here for several years that, shocked you or that you didn't necessarily anticipate?
Well, for one, actually, I became a fan because as I bring people to races who have never been to a NASCAR race before, I'm betting 100% with turning people into fans because they don't know what the sport's about. And especially as they see the garages and how everything operates, they're fascinated by the whole process. And I found myself fascinated by the whole process of not knowing what went into putting on a race every weekend. And that in turn made me, a fan of the sport. One of the things that really fascinated me also is the fact that, it truly is a family atmosphere. We see each other every weekend at the track and you become friends with everyone and you see the same people. And some people you're speaking to every weekend and you may not even know their name, but you see their face. And so that's one of the things that struck me as I would come to love is the family atmosphere, especially at being a baby of 10 kids. So I love that about the sport.
Alan, being with President Obama, you have a lot of knowledge about Chicago and the state of Illinois. I think that knowledge and familiarity was integral in our success of keeping the Chicago race safe. But now another challenge. In a couple months, we're going to Mexico City for the first ever NASCAR Cup Series points race. What has that process been like from a security standpoint and working with a foreign government? Is that a new challenge? But also, I think you probably can lean on your previous life for that as well, in making sure that event is secure as well.
Yes, that's a good question, Mike. And yes, that's one of the things that as a Secret Service agent, you spend a lot of time, obviously, overseas and work with foreign governments and foreign police agencies. And that, in turn, has been helpful for me so far in the planning process for the security measures for the Mexico race. Working with the State Department and knowing, the different people to call within the State Department has been integral, and being able to lean on some old relationships that I had from when I was with the Secret Service as well to help me in planning this security event for Mexico City. So that all has come full circle and being able to help me be successful with NASCAR and putting everything together as well. So I'm looking forward to it, and the planning process is going very well, and it's going to be a very good event.
Well, and I want to say before we kind of start to wrap the interview and kind of wind down the time here that we've had together, I do want to say that, Alan, we're so grateful for you and your team. Not only do you guys work really hard to keep us safe at the racetrack, but also we couldn't do our job to the level that we are able to do so without your team. And especially as we're on pit road after a race trying to execute interviews with our TV partners and really just media in general, we would not be able to do that as successfully as we do without your team. So thank you guys for always, for your support and for your willingness to help us, because it just makes our lives so much easier and ultimately makes the drivers and teams on pit road, to be able to conduct those in a safe environment as well.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. I think one of the things that, I'd like for everybody to know and understand that everybody that's part of the NASCAR team has retired from either a local police department, a state agency, or retired from the federal agency. So they bring a lot of experience to the track each and every weekend to help keep everybody safe, and the fans safe, the drivers safe, the industry safe, for everybody to come have a good time, enjoy themselves while they're at the races. So we enjoy doing it every weekend, and we enjoy talking to everybody. And by all means, we're friendly. Feel free to come say hello to us. We won't scare you away.
He does have a very friendly team. It's a really great team. Keep us safe. Appreciate what you do every week, Alan, and your entire team. And thank you for joining us at Hauler Talk here this week.
Thank you for having me.
NASCAR returns to Martinsville Speedway this weekend, and the last time NASCAR was in Martinsville was for their annual race every fall that sets the Championship 4 field. That race was won by Ryan Blaney, but of course Blaney's win was overshadowed by the fact that there was a lot of controversy in this race, and you had a situation where there was race manipulation involved. 9 people from 3 teams were suspended. $600,000 in fines were issued. And then NASCAR also made some changes in its rule book during the offseason to be able to sort of enforce violations against manufacturers in the future, because there have been some manufacturer chicanery during that race last November. So I'll throw it to you guys. What is different as NASCAR returns to Martinsville off of those rules that were created in the offseason to prevent this type of controversy from happening in the future?
Yeah, I think there's two answers to that question. One is a rule, like you mentioned, and one is a philosophy. So when you look at the rule, one of the holes, I guess you'd call, in the rule book after that race, there was really no mechanism for us to penalize an OEM. OEM is another acronym for manufacturer, so Chevrolet, Ford, or Toyota. So what we noticed was we can suspend crew members, we can fine, and do all the things at the disposal in the deterrence model that's laid out in the rule book. But really, there was nothing that we could do to the OEMs. And right now, in the off season, took a long, hard look at that and added things like taking away wind tunnel time, taking away CFD time, things like that. And those are some real deal penalties. They're already at a premium wind tunnel time. The teams are already capped at those. And so if you take that away, and the reason they're capped at those is cost. Those CFD runs and wind tunnel time, those are not free. And there is a lot of investment in that. And that's how teams do R&D, and that's how they find speed. So if you take some of those hours away, that's a big deal. So that's one. And then two is really, I guess, what I call a philosophy, if you will. And it's one that we are going to make faster decisions when we see things like that. We saw what was going on with the 3 and the 1 really acting as a police escort for the 24. We saw what was happening with the 23 as well. But we had a philosophy back in as early as last October or November, whenever the race was, that we really wanted to make sure anytime we gave a penalty out, we were 100% sure that was the right thing to do. And we still feel that way, of course, but we have so many decades of experience up in race control right now where we didn't need to really look at SMT data. We didn't need to look at video review. We didn't need to do a bunch of interviews to find out what we already knew, and that was there was some funny business going on there. So I think with our chairman, God, New York accent comes out again. I can't miss an episode. Our chairman, Jim France, put down an edict with our competition team that said, hey, I trust you guys. If you see something that doesn't seem right to you, seems a little fishy, seems against the rule book, have the wherewithal to make the call right then and there. Make it in race control. We don't need to keep our fans waiting Monday, Tuesday, and sometimes into Wednesday morning to make a decision on that type of thing. So, I don't think you'll see that this weekend in Martinsville on Sunday afternoon, but once we head back to the playoffs, I obviously can, because it is once again the penultimate race of the season and sets the field for the championship 4. So hopefully things like the OEM penalties, things like that, philosophy change really changes the mindset of the competitors, that's not going to be tolerated, and it's going to be swift action. So that is something that we wanted to do for our fans. We felt that they deserved that assurance that when they turn off their TV or leave the racetrack, that they know what they just saw is going to be it, and you're not going to have to wait until Tuesday to find out if we're going to levy a penalty.
Well, Forde, in reference to the ruling that we did make that evening, which obviously impacted Christopher Bell, and then William Byron, but you were in the tower that night.
Yep.
You were there. I was on pit road. You were in the tower. There's often, when they're in the process of making a decision, there's often criticism that comes, and understandably, like, what's taking so long? What are they doing up there? Sometimes people like to make jokes, like, we're up there eating ice cream, or, doing something like that. But we know from experience that that's never the case. There is so much going on in those moments. What is one thing that you would like the listeners to know that was going on, and what was taking place during that time? Though I realize if you're on the outside looking in, it feels like it took forever. But typically when you're in those situations, at least when I've been in those situations, it feels like time is moving super quickly. Everyone's aware that the decision needs to be made. But there's also an element of wanting to make sure you're confident in that too.
Right. I think, there's a lot of moving parts in general in race control, and I think they were moving just faster in that night, even though it did take, I think the number was 27 minutes from checkered to decision. You have the SVP of competition, Elton Sawyer, the Chief Racing Development Officer, and John Probst, each having discussions with Brad Moran, the NASCAR Cup Series Managing Director, talking to our replay operator, Devin Joseph, asking for a replay of what happened, what Bell did, replays of the 23, the 1, the 3, looking at all of them, and also doing a lot of math. So Kyle McKinney, our chief scorer, director of timing and scoring, is also running the numbers for every scenario to make sure once we landed on, we don't like what Christopher Bell did there. That we specifically said that the Ross Chastain move is not going to be allowed moving forward, and that looked close enough to the Ross Chastain move that we just cannot allow that. So once we made that decision, now Kyle McKinney needs to reorder the finish, because we're going to put the 20 back to the first car lap down at the time, or maybe the last car in the lead lap. So however we judge that, I think he was the last car in the lead lap. So how does that shake out? And do we have a different championship 4 than we did when the checkered flew? I actually forget what that was. I think Byron was in, and then once we made the decision, Bell was in and Byron became it. So we had to reorder the standings, find out the new finishing order, let TV know, and then announce it over the radio. So a lot of moving parts. Did take a while, but I think it's going to be a lot faster coming up later on this year. And hopefully we don't have this situation, but that's why we make rules that we do. So if we do run into that situation, we can handle them a little bit swifter than we did in October. So that is Martinsville coming up in the postseason, but immediately we have Martinsville right in front of the windshield, right in front of us, Sunday, March 30th at 3 p.m. It'll be on FS1, triple header. Really big weekend if you think about it. You got the Triple Truck Challenge debuting, and the Truck Series race. That's going to be on Friday evening at 7:30. You got round 2 of Dash for Cash in the NASCAR Xfinity Series on the CW. That's at 5 p.m. And then, like I said, Cup Series action, FS1 at 3 p.m. After that race, make sure you tune in to YouTube, NASCAR's YouTube page. They have the live version of Inside the Race hosted by Steve Letarte. We mentioned it earlier. Nate mentioned it. It really is a good program. They really break down using stats, using Steve's know-how, have special guests, reporters on the ground in Martinsville, really breaking down why the winner won, why whoever didn't win. It's a really educational program, so do tune in to Inside the Race as well. So a lot of action on track this weekend, and you'll be there, Amanda. So looking forward to hearing everything from the paperclip come next week.
Well, I look forward to that as well this weekend. And just a friendly reminder to fans, we have a NASCAR hotline. I don't know if fans know that, but
it's unbelievable. You got to check this out. It is so
unbelievable. There is a NASCAR hotline every week. It features a recording from a current NASCAR driver. So if you are in a situation where you're like, I don't remember what time the race starts, I don't remember what channel it's on or what broadcast partner it might be slated with, feel free to call the NASCAR hotline. It will tell you everything you need to know. And that number is 386-854-3002. I'm not sure who's on deck for this weekend.
I think it's there. What was that? Who's the picture?
That was last week. It was, Tyler Reddick. Okay. But my gut says it might be
Blaney?
William Byron or Blaney. William's the defending race winner. Yeah. Blaney was the winner in the fall. I would put money on one of those two being most likely the driver who's on deck this weekend. But a lot of fun. It's actually pretty entertaining to listen to.
Is. Yeah, it's really
I've been known
fun
to call it just to make sure I have the information correct as well. So as always, thank you for listening. We appreciate all the feedback, even the 1-star reviews left about my comments. Thank you guys for tuning in each week. We really appreciate it. And as always, keep those comments and questions coming. Rate and review the podcast, and we'll be back next week as we recap Martinsville.
Have a great week, everybody.
See ya.